Curious. I don't have a little bell. I would ring something, but I'm going to mess up all of our video equipment here. So I want to welcome you to the 2015 Division of Financial Institutions presentation on our hot topics. Oh, wait a minute. Excuse me. Put it to the slide. Okay, I think we're ready now. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to turn your phones off in either silent ringer or, it'll cost you $1 for the first phone that rings. It'll be $1. The next phone that rings will be $2. We're collecting. It'd be like that fine, the administrative fine. There'll be several question and answer periods during the presentation after each segment. If you have a question, we have a mic set up so that you can, please feel free. You don't have to identify yourself. We won't turn the camera on you. Don't turn the camera on the questioners. Okay. So that everyone can hear the question. And I might even have an answer. The restrooms are out the door, to the left, and down the hall. So it looks like you're going down the wrong path, but out the door, to the left, down the hallway. Okay, what else is going on? Oh, don't forget to sign in. So not that we're keeping track, but if you, some folks want to use that for training purposes. So we will make a copy of your signature that you signed in and send that to you if you would like. If you have a question, during the presentation, you can stop and go to the mic and ask a question, or if you think you can speak loudly, you can shout it out. Okay, let's see. And if you have a parking meter, if it's, your time is running out, please be sure to go and feed the meter because the parking enforcement doesn't force the parking meters. So I won't feel bad if I see people start running out. I won't think it's me. Okay, any questions before we begin? Okay, so my name is Iris Cicada. I'm the commissioner for the financial institutions. And like I said, this is our one presentation that we have annually. We are recording this. We're not streaming it live, but we are going to be putting this up on our website in the next couple days. So be sure to look for it. We will reblast everyone once it gets on there. Or you can just take a look. It will be in the toolbox section. So I don't know if you've been to our website. At the bottom, if you scroll down, we have a toolbox, and it has tools that you can use for your company. Okay, here we go. So here's what we're going to cover today. We are going to cover the Truth in Lending, RESPA Integrated Disclosure Rule, the new TRID forms. We're going to cover privacy, cybersecurity, and I know this is what you all came for, is the exam hot topics. Okay. So the new TILA RESPA Integrated Disclosure Rule. Okay, so this was created by CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as mandated by Dodd-Frank. The new forms are up on their website at consumerfinance.gov. So these new combined forms are supposed to make it easier for consumers to understand what their mortgage transaction is all about. There's only two forms now, the form called the Loan Estimate Form and the Closing Disclosure Form. It's created to use clear language and design. So I don't know if any of you have seen the new form yet. It applies to most closed-end consumer mortgages. It does not apply to HELOCs, reverse mortgages, mobile homes, and some land transactions. And the effective date is August 1st. Okay, so we're going to go into some detail about that. So what is this TRID? And I'm going to use what everybody's been calling it, the TRID. What is that all about? So it's consolidating all of those disclosures that you're familiar with, the GFE, the HUD-1, the Truth in Lending form, all of those forms. You don't have to worry about all of those forms now. It's all now down to 2 forms. The loan estimate form must be delivered or placed in the mail no later than the 3rd business day after receiving the consumer's application. So just like the GFE, same rule applies. The closing disclosure, though, must be provided to the consumer at least 3 business days prior to the consummation. So be sure to do that counting. When you think that the loan is going to be closing, you want to make sure that that lender is sending out the closing disclosure, or it's going to hold up the closing.
Donna, 2 questions.
Yes.
Hopefully I'm loud enough. If I do an early disclosure before the application, how do you stand on that? Is that meeting the requirement?
Okay, I'm going to cover that coming up. Yeah.
On the closing, what is consummation? Is that recording or is that signing?
That is, Mark, do you remember?
On the consummation,
Yeah.
On the settlement and then the final closing.
it's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that the,
but they also said state specific.
yeah, we'll have to check on that. We are going to be releasing some FAQs. There is some guidance that the CFPB has provided. It's on their website in the form of Q&As. It's a 93-page Q&A that's up on their website. I'm not sure if it answers that question directly. They also want us to look at what the state requires. So we'll take a look at that. All right. So what is covered by the TRID? It covers most closed-end consumer credit transactions secured by real property, so all your mortgages. Applies to trusts for tax or estate planning and not to HELOCs, reverse mortgages, mobile homes, or some land transactions. Record retention. So we do tests for this. Everybody's going to write this down. Records, you have to maintain that in some form for 7 years, and that's according to our state law. Okay, so it could be electronic, it could be in paper form, however it is that you folks want to retain that, just so long as if we ask for it, you're able to reproduce it. Okay, so here's the effective date and transaction. To your question, the new TRID forms effective August 1st. Creditors can use the GFE, HUD-1, the TILA forms for applications received prior to August 1st. You can use the forms, the TRID forms after August 1st. And here's the thing that CFPB was pretty clear about. You cannot use the form before August 1st. So August 1st, some magic switch is going to turn on. You need to use the new form.
But then to answer your question, it's the 6 pieces of information qualifies as an application. Under the new rule, they are removing the clause where, and any other information that the creditor or loan originator deems necessary. So once you have those 6 pieces of the property.
We have a slide for that. Okay, so before August 1st, use the old forms. August 1st, start using the new forms. Okay. Okay, so what happens on August 1st? Because that's the magic date, so everyone mark that on your calendar. The restrictions on activity before the consumer's receipt of the loan estimate form. Are you imposing fees on the consumer? The consumer must indicate an intent to proceed with the transaction. You have to provide written estimates for the terms, that's the new TRID form. Requiring the submission of documents verifying information related to the consumer's information, that's going to be restricted. So that's the no other information that some of you were asking for before you would send out the early disclosures. Okay, so I just have a slide on what TRID applies to, what you have to use the form for, and for which transactions you cannot use the form for. So that's something that CFPB did make pretty clear. If the rule applies, you must use the new form. If the rule does not apply, you cannot use the new form. Okay, so here's what the loan estimate, here's when you have to release the new form. Okay, so it must be delivered or placed in the mail no later than the third business day after receiving the application. Okay, so what is an application? Page down one more time. Okay, so when do you have an application? When you have the name, the address, the social security number, the property address, the estimated value of the property, and the loan amount sought. When you have those 6 things, that will trigger the loan estimate form. So what is a business day? A business day is any day when the creditor or an MLOC is open to the public and carrying out a substantial part of its business. So that could be Saturday, if Saturday is one of your regular working days where you're providing services to the public. It could be Sunday. Whatever days that you determine are the days that you are open. And then, of course, people are always asking, what if you don't have the exact costs? Because you're not going to always have the exact costs. You can use the estimate, because it's called the loan estimate form, right? So you use the range of the fees. Okay, so that was a high-level TRID. Questions? No? Okay, I know a lot of the lenders are putting on some training for you folks to talk about the TRID, what their expectations are. So, you should follow what they're doing. Lenders are getting a lot of this training also. So hopefully we'll all be on the same page. Okay. We'll move on to the next topic, privacy. So privacy, why are we talking about this? And we're talking about privacy because I think almost all of our MLOCs, almost all of our MLOs are using some sort of electronic communication to communicate with their customers or clients. Does anyone not use email? Does anyone not use the internet? Okay, because if, this won't apply to you if you don't use any of those tools. All right, so here's the type of transactions we're talking about. Written correspondence, email, voicemail. Okay, so in that first group, when you're calling your customers or emailing your customers, I would say that if you're not using an encrypted email, do not send an email or leave a voicemail message that has their name, social security number, bank account statements, bank account numbers, so that bad people can pick it up during that transmission. Information posted or submitted through the internet or on your internal intranet. This is where a lot of the companies are the most vulnerable. You're posting stuff on your internet site. You're not checking it all the time. Someone could have hacked in and added things to your internet website to track, bad people, to track what your customers are doing. Or on your internal intranet site. So the internal site where you use for all of your employees, is that something that you folks are secure on? Do you have some security parameters for that? Fax transmissions. I don't know how many people are actually using fax transmissions. We had an opportunity to use that the other day. We had to call the company to make sure that they had a fax machine. Because their email was down. So we couldn't send them email. So we're looking for another way to send the transmission to them. So same thing on the fax machine. If you are transmitting something that has some sensitive consumer data, you want to be sure that the other person is waiting there on the other end to get that data. Telephone conversations and business meetings, presentations. All of those are oral. You want to be sure that you know who you're talking to. Are you talking to your customer? Did you verify that you're talking to your customer? Is it someone acting like your customer? How do you know? So you need to figure out some way to validate that the person that you're talking to is the person that you want to talk to. Wires and ACH transactions. You folks might not do so much of this, but we have some MLOCs that are also lenders. So on those wires, you want to make sure that they are sent through a secure line. And if the bank is opening up their line for you, make sure that your connection to it is secure, because they are opening up their line as a vulnerability. They're going to trust that what you're sending them is not going to contain any viruses. And then my favorite thing is scratch paper or sticky notes. So you know how, and I don't see this as often now, but as more internet sites require a password, you know how you want to write them all down because there's so many that you have to keep track of? And so people put that on the side of their computer or on their desk or in their desk drawer that's unlocked with the name of the internet site and their password. So you try not to do that. That creates another vulnerability for you and your company. Okay, so why are we talking about all this? Because of identity theft. Identity theft, this is the fastest growing white-collar crime in the United States. As you probably can guess, banks absorb most of the economic losses from credit and deposit account fraud associated with these threats. But these are significant issues for MLOCs and a risk that every MLOC employee should be aware of, because you could be the one that is leading your customer to have the identity theft. Okay, so what are we talking about? What is identity theft? So it's the fraudulent use of an individual's personal identifying information. And the personal identifying information could come in one of those 10 things, 10 ways that I talked about earlier on the previous slide. So we're talking about any combination of 4 of these: the person's name, social security number, driver's license number, mother's maiden name, date of birth, account number. Any 4 of those in a combination, it'd be easy enough for a bad person to figure out who your customer is, shadow that account, and then drain their bank account. So we had a situation, or I've heard of a situation here, where someone was online looking at their bank account information, and before their eyes, they saw someone taking out money from their account. They were the single owner on that bank account, but they saw it in real time, because a lot of our banks have all of those transactions in real time now. He saw his account being ripped off right before his eyes. So it can happen, it does happen, it still happens. These crooks spend all day trying to figure out the best way to do this. I'm not really sure what happened to that person, but I think he called the bank right away to try to shut down his account. But it was too late for some of the money that was already drained from his account. So just be sure that you are not the one that is making your customers have this identity theft. Okay, so here's some examples of some of the simpler ways of thieves, the bad people, stealing information. They impersonate victims in order to obtain information from banks and other businesses. So goes back to, do you know who you're talking to? Make sure that's your customer. Stealing wallets, well, that's kind of the old-fashioned way, but it still happens. Stealing bank statements from the mail. So this goes on a lot, especially during the summer. All of our kids are off school. They don't have anything to do. They kind of think it's funny. They now know that there is money to be made by selling these bank accounts online. Diverting mail from the intended recipients. So they go to so here's how it happens. They go and steal the mail, so they get the person's name. Then they fill out the change of address form at the post office for that person. And so all the mail is diverted. Sort of the old-fashioned way, but it still happens. Rummaging through the trash for personal information. So you see this on a lot of the police shows, where they're going out onto the sidewalk, going through people's trash. Okay, that's what they're talking about. So once you put it out in the public, anybody can go through the trash and get that. So for your company, I would suggest investing in a shredder. If you are shredding colored paper, make sure that, if almost all of your paper is white, and you just happen to have one piece of pink paper, either make sure you put other pieces of pink paper in there, because then if not, it'd be easy to paste together. Or throw some of your old coffee or tea into that bag with that shredded paper, mush it all up so that the ink smears. So those are some easy ways that you can save personal information. So I have to tell you a story. When I was in college, there was one bank that accidentally shredded checks. And what they did was they had this out of the paper. They were looking for people who would come in on the weekends that had jigsaw puzzle skills. And I had no idea. I love jigsaw puzzles. So I went to see what it was all about. And sure enough, they dump out this bag in front of me. It's like, okay, piece as many together as you can. Like, oh, that's very unusual. They accidentally did it. There was only a few bags, but checks are small, right? And so there was a lot of checks in one bag. But people do that all the time. It's not that hard to paste them all together. Stealing personal information from workplace records. So if your company is robbed, you want to be sure, most people, you want to make sure that no money is taken. But really, that's important. But you want to make sure that the laptops aren't stolen, or that if you have hard copy files, that those weren't taken. Or pieces of paper from those files were not taken. I think folks kind of forget that they should check check on that. And then intercepting or otherwise obtaining information transmitted electronically, hacking. So if you don't have any firewalls, if you don't have any security on your company's computers, you are the prime suspect. Because all these criminals, in a way, they're kind of lazy. They want to go to the easiest source. So don't be an easy source. And not to scare you, but identity theft may go on undetected for months or even years. Victims of identity theft may not even realize that someone has stolen their identity until they're denied credit or until a creditor attempts to collect on an unpaid bill. So, you're running your credit report for your customers, and you think that they might have good credit, but no, lo and behold, their FICO score is super low. Well, they have all this credit that's not theirs. It's a possibility. Okay, here's another way that people steal the information of you or your customers. It's called social engineering. Have you folks heard about that before? Okay, social engineering is the attempt to manipulate or trick a person into providing confidential information to someone who's not authorized to get that information. So we have 4 common types. So pretext calling. So this is where they call up and they go, this is Iris from the tax department, and you have unpaid taxes. You need to go to this website, put in your social security number, we'll run a check. Oh, and also put in your bank account number to just pay electronically. It's amazing how many people do that. Even though they've done their taxes and they're expecting a return, or they've already paid. It's amazing how many people. And this year, there were a number of people that got caught doing that. These thieves are really good because this year, part of the scam was they gave a badge number, they gave their name, they gave a badge number, they gave a telephone number that looked like it was coming from Washington, D.C. So they're good at this and made it very believable. Okay, the second way, dumpster diving. So dumpster diving is just what it sounds like. You go out into the trash and get the information. The third way, shoulder surfing. You guys do this? Either to your employees or, I do this to my kids all the time. They're using their computer, and I'm looking over their shoulder to see what they're doing. So thieves do that all the time. You're working at Starbucks or you're meeting your customer at Starbucks. They're shoulder surfing to see what you have on your laptop screen. And the way they do it is they take pictures with their smartphone and then they just enlarge what it is that you have on your laptop screen. And then, of course, identity theft, which we talked about. Okay, do you have any questions before I go on? Yes?
Iris, on the whole subject of encryption of email.
Yes.
Email's a two-way flow, so you have the consumer on one side
Right.
and us on the other side. How do you get them to encrypt their email?
Right. So that's actually the challenge for you folks, is to have your customers, your clients, not send you personal information. So what I tell banks is, you can't really control what your customers are doing, right? You're going to tell them that they should encrypt stuff, they should send it password protected at the very least to you. But if they don't and send, say, their application through the email to you, when you reply to them, be sure to just reply saying that we received the information you sent. And don't reply with the attachment going back to the customer. right? So, if it wasn't hacked, if the information wasn't hacked the first time coming into you, likely because criminals are looking at companies, they're looking at your company email and trying to see what you're sending out. So that's probably the best way that you can protect yourself, because you can't really control what your customers are doing, unfortunately. Any other questions? Okay, that was a good one. Okay, so related to this, cybersecurity. So we've all heard about cybersecurity. This is the hottest topic amongst the regulators. Okay, so there are 5 things that I'm going to talk about. Identify your internal and external cyber risks. Protect your organizational systems, assets, and data. Detect system intrusions, data breaches, and unauthorized access. Then, of course, what do? You have to respond to a potential cybersecurity event. And then, hopefully you get to this last piece pretty quickly, recover from the event and resume your normal activity. Okay. So first, identify. You want to go through and assess, do a risk assessment. You want to classify what you would consider your crown jewels. So the crown jewels are whatever you would consider the most important pieces of information, customer information, or company information, that if they were stolen, it would be disastrous to you. You want to identify what those threats and vulnerabilities are. So hacking, customers sending you unencrypted personal data, pretext calling, someone hacking into your website and adding some malware to it. You want to somehow be able to measure that risk. And then you want to be able to communicate the risk to your employees. Okay. So here we go. Crown jewels. What are they? As I said, you want to classify what these are. These are people, so your employees, the property, because you want to protect, you want to have a door lock, at the very least, and information. So you want to classify these as either, and you don't have to use these, confidential, which would be a severe impact to the company if it were stolen. Internal use only, meaning it's minimal or there's a limited impact to the company if it was stolen. Restricted, it's a limited impact to the company if the information was stolen. Or public information, stuff that you have on your website, open to the public. If that was stolen, could you still do business? So as you're identifying these threats and vulnerabilities or weaknesses, you want to be sure to classify as many as you can. Don't forget natural disasters, it's hurricane season, so you want to make sure that you capture that. Internal threats, and internal threats are your employees. Physical threats are intruders, someone breaking into your company or your house. And internet threats, which are hackers. When you measure the risk, you measure it, in the usual way, low, medium, high. Is it a low risk, medium risk, high risk? And then, of course, you communicate the risk to your employees about what the risks are and how you're going to manage it if it happens to you. Okay. Next one, protect. Okay, this is my favorite word, cyber hygiene. These are the steps that computer users can take to protect and maintain their systems. So you want to do some customer authentication. You want to develop and implement a security measure to reliably authenticate customers. you want to use the privacy laws that I talked about to protect you. Access controls. You want to identify and separate your most sensitive and critical information assets, those crown jewels. You want to make sure that you have the tightest firewalls or tightest encryption around those things. And then maybe you want to establish multiple layers of security so to access that type of information. So the easiest way to do that is, if it's you have a few MLOs working for you and they're only doing applications, well, that they can't access MLO B's portfolio. So you want to only let them see what they're doing, not what everybody else is doing. Okay, and then data security. So this is loss of control over protected or sensitive data. Data encryption can protect your company's critical information assets, those crown jewels. Wireless networks. So how many of you use wireless networks? In fact, there's a wireless network within the Capitol right now. So all your smartphones can access it. If you use a wireless network for your customers, make sure that the public network is separate from your internal network. Right? That makes sense, right? You want to have your public, you want to give them access to the internet. That's okay. But you don't want to let them in on the same network that your employees are using. And then, of course, use a firewall to protect from intrusions. And I don't just mean just buy a firewall. Just because you have the firewall doesn't mean that it's working. You want to make sure that you can test it to make sure that it's working.